Hello, Pili and Jason. Thank you for joining me.
So happy to be here.
Yeah,
so
psyched to be here.
So it's great to have you both. As I was just saying, it's always fun to have two guests on a show because you get both perspectives and the battle of who gets to answer what's questions. So I'm going to start with a question about both of you. You're obviously in the property investment world, Yarusi Holdings. So that's your family name, your last name. Well, one of you, your family names anyway. You're married, you have children. I know the last number I saw reported was about $75 million of property under management portfolio, something like that. I know you've got big numbers. I'm reading your website, 800 units with partners, 450 under management. That's massive. I can only imagine the logistics of controlling all of that. Have I summarized everything? Are any other highlight reels that I should throw in there?
You did a good job. That's been there's plus and minus thing going on there. We've had two acquisitions. We have another one coming up, and we sold two properties. So, but in realm, that's part of the flow, right? So we're going to have that constant inflows and outflows as properties as we continue to go here. Typically, there's a cycle between 3 to 7 years on which we hold properties, and so we really focus on one acquisition per quarter, and that's what really our game plan is, and our actions lead us where it may not in line that we get a deal a quarter, but usually for the year, on the scope of the year, it falls out that we'll find about 4 opportunities that will come upon us.
Okay. How do you two divide up the work? Like, is one of you a specialist at one side and another specialist at the other?
So we actually get asked this question a lot. We let's start with everything that happened like in 2020. So when 2020 happened, we have both had these conversations, like what part of the bus do we sit on? So when something big happens, and this has nothing to do with me being the mom and Jason being the dad or male or female, but he went totally business and I went totally family. We crossed each other's paths a lot. We definitely helped each other out, but when something big happened, we knew exactly where we were supposed to be at that time. So once everything settled down, it took 2 or 3 weeks for the dust to settle for us. We started going back into our, I guess you could call it, regularly scheduled program. So usually I take more of like the speaking to investors side. I'm part of more of the investor relations, whereas Jason.
Yeah, so Pili's really investor relations, branding, really captures on that side a lot of the social media aspects, and then I'll follow suit with asset management, working on leads, acquiring leads, putting together the repositioning plan. And so that's a good dividing factor for us and gives us good attention where we can both really parlay our strengths.
Okay, and there must be a team under you, I'm assuming, too. Like, do you have employees or contractors or both?
We have one employee. What we do here is we employ third parties for the property. So we buy a large property, and in each area we'll have set team members, internal and external, that we'll work with. And within these team members, so your externals are going to be your brokers, your bankers, your property managers, right? Your internals are going to be your asset managers and your assistants, your underwriters, who may in fact be us or also our employee. And then past that, we will have now other partners who we may partner with, not always, whether they bring us the deal or they bring some kind of value to the deal, who will be part of each deal, because each deal is its own separate entity. We do single asset entities for each one, so each one will be its own LLC, and so the structure, although understandable, will be slightly different the way each deal is packaged.
Okay, so I know, like, as a person listening to this, you hear numbers like 800 properties. It doesn't sound like even possible to only have one employee. Even if you have partners and everything, it just seems like there'd be so many pieces. And I'm sure when you guys started, if we go back in time, I don't know if you ever thought maybe as a vision 800, but you were not thinking, next week we're going to have 100 properties under management. There's kind of a graduation process to work your way up to that. Do you mind if we go back in time? I don't know who to start with here. Maybe we can go back before you even knew each other, before you were in property. I know, Jason, you've got an entrepreneurial background. Pili, I'm not sure. I know from a previous podcast, there was a bit of an acting history in here, heading to Hollywood. So maybe we can go back. First of all, where were you both born? We can start there.
So I was born in Hilo, Hawaii.
Lovely.
And Westfield, New Jersey. So yeah, we're both opposite sides of the world, right? There are opposite sides of the U.S. And Pili, of course, the actor's side, but you also did Hello Barely.
Yes, I had a berry farm at one point. I was always busy. I went to college. I got a liberal studies degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was all these things I wanted to do. I was always working odd jobs. I've been a librarian. I've been I took a dabble at farming. I was a bartender, waitress for years. I've done so much in my, I feel like I've had so many multiple lifetimes in my one blessed life that it all kind of led up to where we are today. So yeah.
So many times you think you have to find that perfect, I need to find that perfect job, that perfect route, that perfect thing. But sometimes the best case scenario, or most times, is that you start doing things that are in front of you to find what you don't want to do, right? And to lead you to where you want to go. Because ultimately we sit in the sideline with trying to not take action until that perfect action comes up, but we usually miss it, right? Because we're not ready, we haven't prepared, we have a point where on the opposite side, you see someone out there just plugging along, doing something and putting their best foot forward in what they're doing, even if it's not their ideal, whether they're pumping gas or, working at McDonald's, but they're putting it all in, knowing this isn't where they want to do, but they're grooming themselves to find where they want to go.
On that point, is there a particular job role experience both of you had before you were in real estate that highlighted the part of that task or, aspect of your life that you didn't like? That was a big, aha moment. Can you think of any specific examples?
I can think of a ton. I loaded trucks on third shift on freezing docks. And, in my 20s, I've worked in all kinds of restaurants, bars. I worked in construction. I worked in just many capacities, right? But it's not so much like what you don't want to do, but you have takeaways from what you do there, right? You learn lessons and it drives you, whether it comes down to the point of, running big staffs or understanding logistics or noting how negotiations work or understand the complexities of urgency versus actually needing to do, right? And so you look at those and you find where you want to go. However, there's always those points, right? Because most of the time they said, well, if you knew, you get that question, if you knew something, knew this 10 years ago, you're like, what would you tell yourself? And it's, well, it wouldn't have mattered because I wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have been prepared to be like, oh, cool, now I'll go. It would just been wasted because the foundation was forming, right? The foundation was being built. And I would have, if not, I would have just been, stacking sticks on the ground here that would have had no base to them.
And every time I get that question, what would I tell my 20-year-old self? I would actually tell my 20-year-old self not to listen to me because everything that she went through, whether it's my 15-year-old self, 20-year-old self, 30-year-old self, everything she went through built up the person that I am today. So no matter if I was in a job or in a situation that was not ideal, that situation created me. So I cannot tell that girl, that woman, to do something differently because, chances are I wouldn't have listened because I wouldn't have been ready. And everything she went through, I am the fruit of what she did. So there's that.
But is there I was running a berry farm and I realized I hated fruit. So I want to stay away from produce, or, I was packing in freezing temperatures and I want to stay away from cold weather. Was there any moments like that, that really made you change business models in your mindset, I guess, is what I'm saying?
I think we go in season. I think when we went out to help my dad with the family construction business, we knew this wasn't our ultimate goal, right? But it's not that we didn't find value in helping my father, excel in the time that it was there, right? So it wasn't the hate. I don't think we go in that light to say that would be the point of the question or the word, but
it's like building blocks, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking when we were lifting houses, I was doing a lot of the phone calls, which I didn't like. I actually don't like to make phone calls. I don't like to talk to people I don't know. I'm really good at it though. So I used to make all the phone calls. I used to do all the sales. And Jason, he is incredibly smart. He used to go out there and help out with the blocks. And these are heavy, 40, 50 pound blocks to hold these homes up. Was that the best use of his capabilities? No. But the thing is, those building blocks being able to understand what went into that business has helped us. At least it helped us when we were first getting into real estate. So even those things that and I know you're searching for that thing that we hate or don't like to do, but the
maybe not hate, but yeah,
we tell our children there's nothing to hate about life.
Yeah.
It's all building blocks. Every failure,
Exactly.
every success, it's a building block.
Yeah. And it goes back, like doing the construction work, not the best use of my time, but it builds a certain clarity, right? And so if you stay there forever, then ultimately you've made the decision, right? And most of us find a way to blame everything on others, but we just start taking responsibility, right? So you can control where you want to go if you just start making that decision. And it might not be, we most of the time want something immediately, where, I made a decision, so now I want it, right? But we don't put the time in to see it, right? So we assume that we plant the seed, and the next day we're right with all kinds of rewards, right? And then that doesn't show up, and we say, well, this doesn't work. We're not lucky, we're not this, and we go back to whatever we were doing, right? And then we're miserable at it, and we find the misery. I was actually just driving one of our kiddos around, and part of the conversation was that you're gonna look for the good, right? So if you want to look for the bad, it's all around you. But if you want to look for the good, it's always there too, right? Even if it's not the best place for you, if you can appreciate where you are, that's going to give you an easier path to get where you want to go. But if you're constantly pushing back on where you are and just saying despise, putting your worst foot forward, right? You're not putting the right energy in. That's going to cascade on anything that you do further, right? So anywhere you go, anybody you're with, that energy, it compounds, right? So you're not going to just shift. And that's usually where most people miss, is that they assume, well, when the opportunity comes up, I'll put my best foot forward, right? I'll put all my energy then, but you're never ready, right? You're not ready. You haven't done the work. And so most people say, well, I'm not lucky. Well, the opportunity always comes to people, but most of us choose that we're not going to put any effort into where we are. So when the opportunity or the chance or the moment or the position arrives, we haven't done the work. And so it seems too far-fetched, or it just passes it by.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, hate is not the word I would use. It's more like that nudging in a different direction. I had a business where the profit margins were very small, so it nudged me to change to a different business because I was looking for greater profit margins. But I'd love to keep the story going forward. So, clearly, as you said, you were building on all these experiences. When did you two intersect? Like, how did you guys meet?
So we met on a rusty old barge on the Hudson River in New York City in the Chelsea Piers area. This was the early 2000s, before that whole area became very gentrified. Now it's a beautiful park and it's a beautiful place to go, and you can go and go to a restaurant and have some day drinking happening. When we first started working there, at least when I first started working there, it was cold, miserable. The only reason why I think I got the management position was because I was the only woman who would, and I was 23 at the time, would walk all that way onto this pier that was behind, what was it, the horse stables?
Basketball City. And the police force stables, yeah. In
New York City at 11 p.m. at night during the winter, and I worked all throughout the winter, so I started managing there. At 23 years old, I started managing this huge nightclub.
Wow.
On the water. In comes this guy who wants to work construction. We were repainting parts of the bar, and one of the other bartenders, the boat. Yeah. Yes, you didn't get to go to the bar. One of the other bartenders brings him on. He's like, "This is my friend Jason. He's going to help us paint. Oh, and by the way, he also bartends." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it." So actually, Jason could bartend. He could actually bartend circles around me. And the one thing that I remember thinking when I was 23, and I was like, well, how am I the bar manager of this place? I'm just going to hire people who do it better than me. So everyone that I personally hired were all better than me. So that's how we met back in 2003. But it wasn't until 2012 that we finally got together.
Wow. How come it was so long between meeting and getting together?
It's life's path, right? Yeah. I don't think there was a right way. We both had our other relationships, other turns. Pili moved to California, to Hawaii, to California, back to New York, back to Hawaii. So she was on her moment. I was mostly in New York City, right? But we were just on different paths at that time, and paths find a route. And I think it goes back to what we had said previously: you find what you don't want, and that leads you to what you want, right? And so we spend so much time with what we didn't want to put ourselves in a position to be what we did want.
And the funny thing is that when I left for California, guess who became the manager? So when I got back, now Jason was managing me.
Oh, wow. So you took turns.
We did a lot of communication back in those days. But
that was a good learning lesson too, because
yes.
right, you look at that spot and that we took that 25 times revenue on that place. We probably had at one point 240 to 260 employees. Languages, New York City, so melting pot of languages, right? But you learned how to make things more efficiently from a bar aspect, from a cost aspect, and from a restaurant aspect, and to be able to do that on a grand scheme where you go, that bar was pretty incredible. 2 summers we sold more Coronas, the most Coronas in the world, and that was in 3 months compared to Mexico, like any place in Mexico or anywhere else for their entire year.
Whoa.
Right? So that's how much volume was happening in that place, and so it didn't grow in size; it grew on how many people were coming there, and so we were able to maximize efficiency, right? And that comes a lot to what we do today on buildings is that. You can't always change the sizing, the shaping, and of places, but you can make them better places to live by doing a lot of things, right? And that can go down to improving income, of course, controlling expenses, categorizing different ways to create community, and that trends to better places to live, better communities, better returns, and happier investors. Yeah,
well, I'd love to switch to property, but maybe just take us forward. So you two, you meet. 9 years-ish, 10 years later, you're actually together. Did either of you have property by the time you met, or did that all come after you were together?
No, at that point, at a restaurant in New York City, opened and sold a brewery. At that point, I don't think I did that until after. And then we were still running some of those places there. And then Hurricane Sandy happened, huge storm in the East Coast, right? A lot of detriment to a bunch of areas with the flooding, with the storm work. And my father's business is targeted towards lifting and moving structures. So his business went from doing a handful, 12, 13 projects a year to hundreds. One time he had done like 300 projects in a year at the max. So that business went almost 20 times where it was. So my brother, who was working for us, we moved out to New Jersey, really just helped take the business to perform at that level, right? And so that was that step. But noting we did that step, we knew that this was a step, right? This wasn't the end. This was the step. We didn't know where that was leading to us, and so we didn't know that we wanted to be, or at least learn or involve ourselves more in real estate. We thought that was going to be a direction for us. However, we were so busy with the construction side, we were doing so much that all our time was used in construction. So we were pregnant Pili was pregnant with Luke, our first baby there. 2013. Here we are saying, let's get into real estate, and we find our way into, Pili becomes an agent. We start flipping, we start doing wholesales, and we learned is that we were so busy, and now we just added a lot of other active things on top of it. So the lesson learned there was that we found real estate, but we didn't ultimately find our right direction because we were just stacking busy, right? So here's our time, and now our time's going smaller with everything happening, and we're just stacking busier and busier and busier. So we were going further away from our ultimate goal, just to really control our day, control our time, be able to choose what we want to do, when we want to do it, and how we wanted to do it. So that opened up a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
Opened up a lot of things for us, and Pili met someone who actually was doing rentals out of state.
So I went to a REIA meeting, and I met the gentleman, and he told me about turnkey rentals. And I was like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
Sorry, Pili, I don't want to interrupt you, but there's one thing I have to know before you tell that story. Why did you even choose to become a real estate agent? Like, that was the gateway to all of this by the sound of things. Is that fair? I know you said you were building and adding on, and sounds like real estate was in your mind for both of you, but committing to becoming an agent is saying I'm getting into real estate, right?
Well, it made sense to us so we both wanted to get in, and getting my real estate license gave me access to this amazing thing called the MLS, which I had no idea what that was about. And I look back and I get asked this question a lot, like, could you have done it without getting your license? investors get into real estate without getting their real estate license? And I told him yes, but it was great for us, especially when we were flipping and wholesaling, because I had my license. I had access to all the numbers. I had access to the data. I had access to incredible training. And Jason had access to construction numbers. He could dig in on that end. So our education combined allowed us to take those steps forward. So yes, by getting that license, and I was in my first trimester when I took that real estate exam, and I got over 90%. So it just seemed like the next step to take. Like you'd asked previously, like, how did we take that next step? How did one thing launch us into the other thing? So I didn't want to be in the restaurant industry anymore. I mean, we like to tell people we're just two bartenders that got into real estate. I didn't want to bartend anymore. I didn't want to manage restaurants. And New York City's amazing. I certainly didn't want to live there anymore. So we decided to move into New Jersey and take these steps one on top of the other to get to where we are today.
Okay. So then you have your license. You've got this great combination of the ability to know construction numbers and access to MLS and understanding real estate. How do you come to the conclusion of what your first investment or deal is going to be?
Yeah, well, we actually used what we're doing right now. We were taking houses and lifting them higher so that hopefully they wouldn't flood again, right? And with that becomes a lot of things that FEMA requires to make the house flood resistant, or at least as flood resistant as possible, right? So there's a lot of things, the height, just the area, the space, the way the utilities are performing there. So we did that. So we actually did that and found a house that could be that, but we took it one step further, right? We actually took it one step further, and we actually took a cape, just a single story house, and we raised it up twice. So it was actually the third story now. Wow. And we built a new first story underneath and then a garage underneath. So we took a house that was on the ground, had no garage, none of that points, added in a garage, added in storage, and then doubled the footprint, right? So we added value that way. The one thing that we learned when we start doing these projects, New Jersey is not let me take 1 second here. Let me change the battery here. Yeah.
I can still hear you, so I don't know if you want to.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Again, we switched out everything, so.
Yeah, you said you were moving. The podcast setup is not up.
There we go.
And you're back.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we found a house, and when we did this, we decided we were going to add the value by just really duplicating the footprint and just adding the square footage, right? Because the one thing about New Jersey is it's a very expensive state to operate, right? So everything costs more. Trades are going to cost more, things are going to cost more, taxes are going to cost more. However, you can get a lot more per square foot, right, than maybe you could some other areas. But what we couldn't really envision here was that the timelines with flips, a lot of things is really just being able to be efficient and cut down your timelines. However, what we were running up to in a lot of our projects, we were just doing the construction side of it, is there's a lot of things that become out of your control. We had at that time when Sandy happened, Hurricane Sandy, all the building departments went from maybe having 10, 20, 50 permits a year to hundreds of permits a year. Right. So now their backlog started happening. So they were trying to get people out there. And then the same thing happened now is they don't have enough people to inspect. Well, the same thing happens now with the utility companies, right? The utility companies now have this overflow of houses that have to meet certain requirements to shut off the utilities and cap the utilities to be able to shut off. So they go from this horizon, maybe it's going to take a week to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks out here. So we lost control of the timeline of our projects here. And then we went from a project that the first project was going to be a really profitable deal into making some money, but nowhere near it, because the project went to take like 10 months, right? When it's supposed to be like a 5-6 month project, because of all these variables where we no longer were in control, right? And that usually to the point here where we've learned that most of life is controlling what you can control, and so you can really focus on the timeline of what you can't control. However, unfortunately here, being on this first large project, we had a lot of money allocated on this point. We had done it in cash. We had a lot of things happening here. And so that was driving really the direction of where we were going in the future, but also gave us good learning experiences, but helped us understand more of what we didn't want to do.
Which was these long extended projects. I mean, we actually did end up doing a bunch of them because they were actually fun to do. I mean, we got to add so much value, and we had this dream. One of our value propositions was to raise communities one house at a time. And it took in our house raising capabilities, and we really wanted to just change up the neighborhoods that had gotten flood ravaged. But these projects were taking so long to do. So finally we started to do easier flips, and then we got into wholesaling, which was a whole nother ball game.
Okay. I love the sort of the metaphor there of raising up the property to raise up the community. That's fantastic. Wholesaling is obviously a subject that even I remember when I first was interested in property investing, I was like, wholesale, what does that even mean? Like, I know I can buy e-commerce products at wholesale and then sell them at retail, but I never thought of, you can't buy a house at wholesale. There's not like an Alibaba for houses or something like that. And I also want to tie this in too with the question around viability as a business to support your lifestyle, because it sounds like you two had left the bartending, left New York. I don't know how much your family with your father, Jason, how much that business was maybe still supporting you, because you guys are your family, you're growing, you've got children now. So you have to sort of balance what you're making from these flips potentially with what other income streams you had. And it sounds like you were kind of, like you said, busy. So you're adding more things on top of it. So the decision to go wholesale, was that also because maybe you're looking for a more consistent income stream? Is that accurate too?
I don't know if we've ever needed a consistent income stream. I think one part for us is that I'm always in the assumption I can make more money. And,
okay.
And that's always been the fact right here. And when I guess just how it is, we've never had that like traditional, like, oh, I'm going to go to work. And so this Friday I'm going to expect a check, and I don't get that check. Right. It's always been that fact that we just kind of
neither of us
always had jobs, right? Yeah. And you find ways to figure it out, and you find ways to make money, and that's just been how we've operated. So the wholesaling was a natural progression, right, from where we were. And what we did a little bit differently is that we started really focusing on one city that had a lot of development going on, and we weren't quote unquote finding these wholesales or properties where we could just literally push it off to someone who wants it as a quick flip. We were looking to find sites where the houses were not being optimized for the site because people were buying these to do development. So we got to the point here where we were finding, we were wholesaling properties which were basically going to be utilized as lots for development. And that worked very favorable for us. And it was a short-term horizon. I don't think we did wholesaling for long, but when we did get very specific with where we were going out, that's when we were most beneficial. But I don't think we like that. I don't know if I like that.
I loved being able to help sellers because somebody that's going to wholesale or that's going to sell their property to us, we were very, very transparent. As a real estate agent, I had to disclose everything as my fiduciary duty. So I disclosed everything. I'd let them know what we're going to do, that there was going to be an end buyer. And a lot of these people just needed out of their properties. And they would come to us because our customer service is like second to none, because we would go in there, we would help them out, anything they needed, we would try to provide any services they needed, we would try to provide. So on top of being able to get them out of their property quickly, we would help them out with whatever life struggles that they were going through. So that was my favorite part about wholesaling. But when it came to flipping and wholesaling as a business, because they were really two separate businesses. Again, we were just so busy. At that point, we had 2 children. We were going out every day looking for properties. We were still in the construction company. We were just starting to get into this thing called multifamily. And if you want, I can jump into the story that kind of catapulted us into that asset class where we love it. Like flipping and wholesaling became a job. And if you've understood anything from what Jason and I have told you, like, we're not job type of people. We're not 9-to-5ers. We like to have control over our lives. And when we feel like we don't have control, that stops being our focus. So once we got into large multifamily and multifamily in general, we found that we had more control over our time. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that switch to multifamily. And maybe you can tie it in with this one question that's been sitting in the back of my head here. how do you finance all of this? So how has the finance evolved to this point? And I know it continued to evolve after as well as you hit multifamily. Could you tie that up?
Wholesaling was different. So
Yeah. So, I mean, flipping, wholesaling, maybe cash, maybe hard money lenders, maybe private investors, right? And as we transition to multifamily, it's a mix of our capital. We raise capital from investors where they help with the down payment, the closing cost, the capital expenditures and fees, and we partner that with some kind of debt product. So whether it's from a Fannie or Freddie lender, right, or we do an agency loan, or it's from a community bank, or it's a bridge loan product, which is similar to it has similarities to a hard money loan for single family. We're partnering each project based on the need of the project, right, with the viable loan that works for this. So it's a partner of equity and debt, and typically we're bringing 75%, 70% in debt, and then the rest is coming from the equity side. You always have your cost of capital here, so we're looking at from a component here of the equity. Typically, at most points, it's going to cost more than the debt. So we're usually parlaying that we will maximize where we can to have the right debt product but not be over leveraged, but at the same time gives us the ability to make good returns for our investors based on the capital brought in.
Okay, so maybe you can switch to the multifamily story, and even how did you finance the first deal in that?
Perfect. Sure. So we got into large multifamily because
We'll do small multifamily first. You want to do a couple
Yes, please.
So, yeah. So I was at the RIA meeting, and a gentleman approaches me about the turnkey properties that he has, and I'm just like, not interested, not at all. But he's like, no, you have to look at these here. I'll send you a couple. Just run the numbers. I promise you, they'll. If you're not, because we weren't doing any rentals at that time. So I look at them, Jason, I look at them, and we're like, these actually look really good. And Jason's like, well, I wonder if they have any duplexes or fourplexes. So I go back to him. I'm like, this looks great. Do you have duplexes or fourplexes? He sends us a few, and we end up jumping in because they made so much sense. And if you're talking about financing, we actually bought these ourselves because the entry level was, I think one of them was like $7,000 and the other was like
we were probably in like all in like them. 40, 50K in the end run right there with construction. So we were buying them, in depleted areas. But what it gave us to the point here was it allowed us to understand, investing 1,000 miles away, how to package the team and put people in the right spot. Because what we're finding in New Jersey is what happens in New Jersey is you're close to all your projects, so you can become the bottleneck, or you can become the person who says, I can do everything better, I can do it quicker, I can do it cheaper, or any one of those combinations, right? When you start getting back to the premise like we were at the bars, that you look at this and collectively you can't do it yourself, but how can you empower other people to do it well so we can all benefit, right? Because when we say like, yeah, I could do it better, maybe potentially I could, probably not. But if I could, right, well, I'm taking a job away from someone who could probably do it just at least some level of proficiency close to me or better, and then I can be focusing on big things. So right now, if we're not in our large multifamily business focusing on leads and focusing on money, there's no business, right? So if I'm here, focusing on you fill in the blank, and it's not one of those 2 points here, then I'm taking a role away from somebody else who that's a good role for them to be in that position. And I'm not focusing on the core components that keep driving the business forward.
So it allowed us to basically put the hammer down. It allowed us to just manage the property, manage the managers, because this gentleman ended up having the team set up. He had everything set up. We went in, we took down the property, we took down the construction, but we were able to manage it from New Jersey, and these properties were in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that happens, and all of a sudden the world blows open, because now we know that investing out of state is possible. Now we know investing in rentals out of state is possible. So I'm usually not the one that brings the new big idea to the table. It's usually Jason. So of course Jason sees this, and his head starts, and all the numbers start to turn in his head. And one day he's like, Pili, what if we can do 50, 100, 200? And I'm just like, what? Oh my God, no. And I like, all of a sudden these numbers scare me, because I'm like, that just seems like so out of reach. And I couldn't see that far, but Jason could see it. So he led us on this path of education to get to where we are today. And we were able to take down that first 94 unit in Louisville, Kentucky within 8 months.
Do you mind just, because I know I'm getting a little lost with the numbers, before you said even with those first multifamilies, you were talking 9,000 plus construction cost. What do you mean exactly? 9,000.
So honestly, the houses were completely gutted, rundown areas. There was a ton of, in Indiana. So we were buying these houses very cheap and then putting in $30,000-$40,000 to fix them up, right?
These houses are $10,000, that kind of cheap?
$10,000.
Wow. 2016.
15, 16 right there.
Okay.
So there's a ton of inventory out there. So we were buying them very cheap. And they were predominantly, probably C- areas, right? And so like the mailman was living in the block, right? And so you would have houses and you could retail them higher than that once you got them on board, right? But you were able, because there was so much inventory at the time, you're able to buy these houses cheap because there were just so many that they were just looking to dispose of, right? So we were buying these houses, putting them back online, of course, continue to carry them forward. And then we just saw it wasn't really scalable. Like it had context, but if we wanted to go where we wanted to go, it's not like we were going to do, 50, 70, 100, 2 and 3 families around town. It just sounded like we were going to have organized chaos or some kind of chaos to try and control that. However, if you do get back to the fact here of buying a large property, now it's all under one hat, right? And so you look at these buildings, a 2-unit, if one vacant unit, now you're 50% occupied. A 100 unit, one vacant, 99% occupied, right? And so any small changes, if I go in there and do something to save water in the 2-unit, it's not going to move the needle that far. Although we've done that on a 100 unit and the savings increase values hundreds of thousands of dollars because we're doing things that just move the lever just slightly. But when you compound it over such a big building, right? So it becomes much more favorable. The banks like it more too because there's less risk on them, right? So you have a lot more tenants that can potentially pay the rent. There's a lot of different ways that you could win with large multifamily, and it becomes a commercial property. It becomes a property that's not specifically targeted at us. So they're not looking at us from the banking side. They're looking at us to make sure we're not bad actors, but it's really focused on the property to say, is this property a business that the business plan could be viable to improve the operations and, of course, pay the debt.
Okay. And in my mind, though, there's a big jump between buying a $10,000 rundown house, putting $30,000 in to renovate it. I'm assuming you were putting in a tenant and it was cash flowing, small numbers because we're starting from a small base, but to jumping to a 94 unit complex where you're, running an entire little village basically with tenants and maintenance and construction and so on. Did you make that jump from that small to that big, or were there steps in between?
No, we did. So, yeah.
Well, the step in between was getting educated, like really getting out there and like learning and going to those people who already knew how to do exactly what we wanted to do and made sure that we just hung on for the ride because we just put our head down into the books, learned everything there was to know about large multifamily, and we were able to take that jump because we were able to do that, because we got the mentor, because we got the education.
Okay. Yeah, because of mental gap, right? When you start thinking about it here, is that, most people think it's safe, right? Oh, it's safe. I'm going to go from a single family up to a 4 unit because that would be safer, right? Or I'm going to go to an 8 unit or 10 unit because that would be safer. But when we get back to the core things we just mentioned right here, a 4 unit, 1 vacant, now you're 75% occupied, right? Now it's going to be looking at you from the personal side. It's going to have all these other restrictions. And also you're probably going to be in a whole different subset of buyers. The more you grow, the more you can leverage improving a business, right? So if I had a 300 seat or even 1,000 seat restaurant like we did, right, where they could take that occupancy, or a 20-seat restaurant, right? You might think this 20 seats safer, but you're limited to your capacity, right? You're limited to how many turns you could do, how many people you could put in the door, and you still have your fixed costs. Well, the same thing operates like this with a business. So if I do something on the 20-seat right there, and I order a bunch of food and nobody comes in here, the scalability of what happens here is much more hurtful to the business compared to a large business here, where if I can control or be more efficient on many different components, it can really drive the business forward.
And I completely understand where your question's coming from, because that's the same thing that happened to me when Jason had this grand idea of jumping into these larger apartment buildings. And I was like, how can we do that? How can we go from what we're doing to those numbers, to those dollar signs, to those zeros? I could not make the jump, but it was education and mentorship that allowed me to take those next steps. And truthfully, it was that first closing that really just blew open the doors for me.
Could you take me through that first closing? Because currently live in Montreal, and I remember when I first decided to buy property here, I was looking at, like you guys are talking about, sort of small duplex, triplex, fourplex. But then there's this website that has these large multifamilies all the way up to sort of 300 unit things. But I look at the the price tag, and I'm like, well, this 50 unit complex is 6 million, so I'm not going to take 6 million out of my bank account and buy it, or the bank's not going to give me, a 20%. I don't even have 20% down for that. Yeah. So I know, obviously, I have to find alternative financing partners, some kind of deal. How did you guys address that? And am I kind of explaining a similar number that you were up against compared to the smaller ones for that first deal?
Yeah, sure. So let's take that for example here. So a $6 million property, typically you're going to have to raise about a third of it. So you need to raise about $2 million, right? And you're still going to be financing about 75%, so that's $4.5 million. So either you're going to have that balance sheet, the net worth requirement, to be able to show that to the bank, or you're going to have to find a partner that can represent that, right? So those are those two gaps. And so if you can look at your balance sheet right now, your personal financial statement, and luckily for our first project, we had the balance sheet to do it, right? But if you have to look at the project and say, do I have that balance sheet? And if not, I might have to track back to a size of which I could afford, or find a partner who wants to partner with us and be the net worth balance. Now, on the other side, you have to now find that $2 million. So that $2 million now, let's say if you're raising money from investors and you're asking for $50,000 from each investor here, that's going to be that you at least on minimum need 40 investors, right? Maybe someone will put 100, maybe someone will put 50, maybe someone will put 200. So let's just say you need 40 investors. So you need to start talking to people. And it's going to be about you, right? The people that know you is going to be your initial part. You're going to start talking to people who have been in your network and see how you've operated. So we didn't have the large multifamily background or experience before. We had, we were in other businesses. They'd seen us do other things. They knew that we were proactive and we followed through with what we were going to do and say we're going to do. So if you look at those 40 investors you have to have, say that you need to have 3 conversations to get one yes. Well, that would tell you that if you need 40 investors, you need to have 120 conversations to get to that point here. So you start building out your return. And when you think of that like that, it makes it easy, because I hear it all the time. I don't know who to ask. Well, you just start explaining to people what you're doing, and there's going to be people that you did not expect who are looking for this. Because with any real estate project, there could be a lot of rewards, right? Well, multifamily is usually, and even during COVID, it was the darling of COVID because it has so many different ways you can win. You can win with forced depreciation. You can win with depreciation, tax advantages. And now some of these things are not going to translate the same way to Canada, but they have similar components, right? Then you get debt pay down and you get cash flow, right? So you look at these points here. That's easily 5 ways in portfolio diversification if someone's just on the stock market, right? Now 6 ways that you can win with multifamily. Well, if it's a flip, you can fix it and hope to sell it. That's kind of your route, right? And most of the time, they're not going to work as rentals in these higher priced areas, right? So you have one exit, right? So wholesale, typically, you're going to hopefully find an end buyer who can capitalize on that point because you're not going to buy it yourself, right? The stock market, you put your money in the stock market and it's a dollar for dollar, right? You put $1 in, you're going to get $1 of Apple. Right here, I could equitably put 20 cents in or 25 cents in and get that share of Apple, but it's real estate, right? So your money can go a lot farther. So when you start breaking this down and make it approachable, it doesn't make it the top of Mount Vesuvius. It makes it to the point here where, okay, I just have to figure out, what kind of boots to put on here. And then let me figure out the next question, and make it actionable. So the investors, what we did is that prior to having the deal, we didn't wait for that because we didn't want to put ourselves as subservient as needing the money. We went out and started explaining to everybody what we were going to do to generate the interest, to get people involved, to be specific with what we were looking for, where we wanted to go after. And we were building this stable of investors who were giving us the affirmation that they were going to be interested, right? It wasn't like, here's your money, because we weren't asking for it at the time. We didn't know where the project was going to come from. And it took us 6, 7, 8 months to find that first project. But when we did, we had clarity with enough conversations to understand that we could raise, I think we had raised $800,000 in the first one, that we had already felt that we could raise that money. So when we went back to that, we just went back to the investors who had already said, yeah, I'd be interested in putting, $25 or $50 or $75,000, and just said, remember we were talking about, we were looking for this kind of avatar property. Well, here's the property. We're ready to go. Are you still interested? And it made our gap much smaller. It made it easier to get to the finish line instead of starting it cold, trying to explain who we are, what we're doing now, why we're doing it, the type of things we're trying to do, and then also, the structure, right? Because most people can understand maybe a flip or can understand investing in anything, right? So a stock market or putting in money into, a mutual fund or something of that, but not everybody even knows that it's available to invest in an apartment building. To say, hey, we can go buy that apartment building because in their mind, if they do know about it, they believe it's just for the REITs or the larger players, or the BlackRocks or some of these larger players out there that aren't approachable to a person like them. So we can say that we can do this, right, by pooling money together from like-kind people, that we can achieve the same results. That's also another mental hurdle that the investor has to understand to take forward.
So if we go to like today, is it a case of what you just described as your typical formula? Like you two are out there looking for that avatar, that ideal multifamily property. You find one, and then now you have a syndicate, basically, of people who are all ready when you present a deal to them, that they're going to put in some amount of money to own a percentage of this deal. And then you either eventually sell it, like you said, and then distribute the profits, or I'm assuming there might be some cash flow if it's a revenue producing profit. Is that kind of, in summary, like what is the big strategy for you guys now in terms of how you run the business today?
Yeah, sure. We do look for value add opportunities. Typically, these are each their own syndication. So we partner each one with a holding period. So 5 to 7 years, we're going to hold the property. We look to come into a property that's underperforming, whether it's on the building side or the property side or the management side. Typically, it's a combination of both, right? And so from that, and then from that context, we look to put in a proper practices that can improve the operations and, of course, improve the revenues and improve the cash flows and returns. So, and we partner that by bringing those investors in, and we look to, of course, meet the business plan and then exit in the timeline that we talked about earlier.
Okay. So as a snapshot today, and this is kind of like a question I was curious about in terms of you guys and how you're generating, like, how do you decide to take out your own money from this project? Do you just take the capital from one? Because it sounds like you could forever just take capital from one, put in the next, but you have to, feed the kids. You have to pay, live somewhere and medical, all those sorts of things. So how do you draw money from a business yourself? Especially because you must be always tempted to put it into the next project too, right? Like, how do you balance that?
We do. Yeah, they're great deals. So we like to invest side by our investors.
Yeah.
That's part of the philosophy. However, we have, for packaging and finding the deal, we do get fees, right? So we get an acquisition fee coming off the front end. We get an asset management fee for, of course, the operation of the project here. And then we'll get a split of cash flow. Right. And so at some point here, whether we sell and get our investment back, where that can go into it, or we refinance and pull that capital out, we do have other cash flows and other fees that come out of the project for preparing and partnering and, of course, doing the plan for the investors.
Okay.
So yes, to answer your question, we do. And we try our best to invest in every single deal that we have. The only times we haven't invested is that if we are oversubscribed. Yeah. We would rather provide the opportunity to our investors that want to get into our deals than to just hold the space for ourselves.
Yeah, if we haven't put out that we would be invested, if it does come to context where we have so many investors, which happens frequently, we raise sometimes in a day, we'll get these raised where we won't put the capital in because we'd rather have more people be able to seek the opportunity. And they're not all syndicates. We actually closed one the other day here where the investor came in and wanted to be the sole partner. So he put in the sole capital for the project.
That was fun.
Yeah.
One person to deal with, probably a little slightly easier on the logistics. Maybe last question for you two, or maybe second last. We'll see. If I'm a person listening to this, I've got $25,000 in my bank account. I was thinking about where to invest. You mentioned shares and all that, but I've decided property is it. But I thought with my $25,000, I'm going to buy a condo and put a tenant in there, or at best, I'm going to buy a duplex and maybe live in the bottom and put a tenant in the top and help for pay my rent. Would you steer that person to something different, or do you think they still should start there? I know everyone's different, but maybe from where you guys stand today.
So the conversation would always be what does the investor want to do? We would provide the information on large multifamily. We would tell them, this is exactly what we do, start to finish. Are you interested in it? But if that's something that they want to do, say the conversation comes that they need someplace to live. So house hacking is a great way to have some place to live and to have the tenant pay for the entire mortgage. So it really comes, and this is what I tell everyone. It comes down to the other person. Mm-hmm. And you What kind of opportunity can you provide to them? And is that an opportunity that they need? Because if they don't need that opportunity, I'm not going to shove it down their throat. Because number one, they're not going to appreciate it. And number two, chances are they're not ready for that opportunity. Once they are ready, I'm going to be right there waiting, their friend that knows large multifamily, and that they know that they can talk to me about their financial needs, about their struggles, their needs, their wants, their goals, because it's not about me. It's not about me raising money. I'm using air quotes. It's about me providing them an opportunity. It's about Jason and I having the opportunity to give them some place to safely put their money.
Yeah, so we'll have investors come over to Yarusi Holdings and talk to us about investing, right? And so, but part of the narrative here is that this is a partnership. You're going to be with us for a while, so we want to make sure that the goals align, right? So some of the things here is that these are longer opportunities, right? So we said 3, 5, 7 years. So if you're looking for a short-term horizon, 6 to 12 months, it's not going to be the right opportunity for you. And that's fine, right? Maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. If you're looking for to be active, right? We're not looking for active partners, right? This would be a passive investment, right? So again, wouldn't be the right investment, right? So we don't need you. We would love to give you the opportunity. We don't need you to be invested. We want to make sure it aligns with your business strategy, right? It aligns with your goals, right? So it aligns with where you're trying to go for your future, right? And that usually comes to context where it may be right for you or it may not. And it may not be right for you today, but maybe in a year or 2 years or 3 years it is.
All right. Sounds good, guys. So where can we send people to if they are interested in getting in touch or just learning more?
You can get us at our website, www.yarusiholdings.com.
Awesome. Any other places you want to send people to? I don't know if you guys are active on Twitter or anything like that, or
all over the place, but
okay.
Really, if you go to that website, you will find us on all the other social media.
You find Pili on Instagram at Pili Yarusi or Jason Yarusi on Instagram if you want the personal side there.
Yeah.
But yeah, business side, if you want to learn about the investment standpoint, Yarusi Holdings would be the best spot.
And you two have a podcast too, right? So do you talk a lot about these sort of multifamily topics on that show?
Yeah. Multifamily Live podcast. It is, as said, strictly devoted to talking about multifamily. So from all sides, from just the mental aspect to the actual meat and potatoes of the business itself.
Okay. Awesome.
And you can actually also find that link on our website.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm sure if it's a year or two from now, that number will be like 1,000 doors or 1,200. So it's going to keep going.
Actually hit that 1,000 mark, but I have to check.
Okay.
So I actually have to see where we are.
Update the website. Yeah, you probably have to update the website once a week at the moment. So no, I do appreciate the time and thanks for the insight into what you guys have done and the journey from bartending to multifamily. It's certainly you've been busy. It sounds like there's been a lot going on. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Yara.
Thank you.